And good evening and welcome to the 2D podcast. With us as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager, Pro Football Focus, PFF.com, traveling, not coming from the somewhat spooky little old school bedroom that he's been coming to us from of late. We'll get into where he's at here in a minute. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB here in Kansas City. A lot to get to today, guys. Carlos Dunlap is a Chief. Is that the final piece of the puzzle for the Chiefs to be the favorite now to win the Super Bowl, maybe at least in the AFC West? Kyler Murray's contract. He's not happy with the way it's being portrayed, but he signed it, didn't he? Lamar Jackson, criticism for him. Patrick Mahomes plays street ball, some of the defensive coordinators say. Tyreek Hill is still talking. Deshaun Watson's fate is still looming. Mike McCarthy still has critics. And Jimmy G, I guess, is still going to get traded. A lot to get into tonight. First, Eric, you are at some Brainiac Fest in Philadelphia. Is that right? A big nerd off is happening in Philadelphia, and they invited you to be the king of the nerds.
You would be surprised, but there's a.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Wharton runs a Moneyball Academy for high school students who want to get into sports analytics, and I'm one of the professors, so I'm kind of pumped for that. And I made it here tonight, Petro, despite a couple glasses of wine, I'll say.
Oh, so this is like you're saying this is Eager Unleashed? Is that what we should say?
I mean, I'm not going to give you all the information I have about the Chiefs, but I'll give you 0% of
it. Do that math.
Yeah, do that math. We landed on 0. Okay. Jeff, are you at any nerd off? I mean, this looks like the usual place I see you on NFL Network. And when we do things here, you're not at some nerd off, are you?
I am not, but I have a lot of respect for the nerds. I was a big fan of Lamar in Revenge of the Nerds. I love the concert they put on at the end of the movie. If you remember that, it's a dated reference from the '80s, great '80s movie. But Rick Moranis was one of the nerd guys. So I have love for all nerds everywhere.
Yes. So there it is. Nothing but love for Nerdville here. All right, let's dive into it, guys. What are we thinking here? Carlos Dunlap, the Kansas City Chiefs, and Brett Veach had a press conference when they got to their offseason and said, basically, what we did with the offensive line, we got to do to the defensive line. That had a lot of expectations that, like, look out. Here come the Chiefs. We're going to see a Joe Thuney and an Orlando Brown and draft picks on the defensive line. It didn't materialize, and I think that partially because of opportunity. But here they are. They're adding on to it. They did get George Karlaftis. They have put Chris Jones back at D-tackle. If people don't remember last year, they were really kind of trying to work him over at defensive end. So he's back in the place that made him one of the most feared pass rushers in the NFL. And now they had Carlos Dunlap. 8.5 sacks as a situational pass rusher last year. Is this the final piece of the puzzle for the Chiefs? Jeff, what do you think?
That for me or Eric, who's like head bobbing like a living bobblehead down there?
I love the signing, Jeff. So it's time for you, to pour some cold water on the signing.
I like it too. I'm not Carlos Dunlap is 33 years old, but you mentioned the sack total he had last year playing. I think he wasn't a regular starter. He was more of a rotational guy in Seattle. He's always been fairly productive throughout his career. This is a defensive line that needs depth in a big way. And I think we've all known that. And Brett Veach knows that. And what I assume he did not want to do was go out there and get crazy and just pursue somebody just to pursue them. They found Melvin Ingram at midseason last year, and it worked out for them. Dunlap was on the street. I think they recognize that you're asking a lot of a George Karlaftis to come in here and give you what Melvin Ingram gave you. You're asking a lot of Frank Clark to be healthy for 17 games, which when's the last time he was healthy for a full season? Chris Jones, like I've said before, is the guy you have to be a dominant presence, which I expect he should be. But after that, you're just kind of hoping that a lot of things don't happen to you that are bad luck, whether that's injuries, whether that's rookies not playing up to expectations. They need more bodies. And so I think Carlos Dunlap, a guy who's played in this league a long time and had success, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense as well. Eric, you obviously like it even more than what Jeff just said, as you were like, almost at a rave or something with your reaction.
Oh, come on.
But I don't know. I thought you were going to break out glow sticks there for a second.
Yeah, I mean, Dunlap has been involved in 18 sacks the last 2 years, 59 pressures in, just over, it hasn't, like, he's been pretty good, right? Like, so you look at the Chiefs and Melvin Ingram has been the guy who, he came in early in the season and everybody's like, okay, this is the savior for this team. And they get Dunlap after one practice. I think that sort of shows, A, how serious the Chiefs are about winning this year, and B, how dire the straits were at defensive end this year. Right? Like they started with Michael Dana because, Frank Clark was sick or whatever. And then you have, George Karlaftis, of course, Joshua Kane-Doe, folks like that. And they said, okay, like, look, let's get serious. Let's go ahead and get Carlos Dunlap in here. Like I said, a lot of pressures the last couple of years, more than a 10% pressure rate per pass rush snap, and more than 18 sacks, 15 to 16 quarterback hits the last 2 years. Like, I think this is a guy that's going to be productive for them. It just amounts to what they're going to ask him to do.
And it's from Seattle, right, Soren? They love Seattle Seahawks defensive linemen.
Yeah.
Going back to the tree.
What can go? A lot of time in Cincinnati previous to Seattle, but yes, going back to where they got Frank Clark. The thing that I like, and I know Eric, PFF, and you talk a lot about the pressure rate and getting pressures. I like sacks.
I know you and Sam talked about sacks on the show. What, Monday when you had Sam on? Like,
yes, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. For those who don't know,
I agree that sacks matter. So just to give the listeners a sort of primer here, sacks are worth about 2 points to a defense. Pressures are worth about 0.3 of a point. So sacks are about worth 3 times as much as pressures.
7 times. I
mean, depending upon whether you want to round up or round down.
It's definitely not 3. I think you misspoke.
Well, so sorry. A pressure is worth, I round it up. A pressure is worth negative 1.8 points for an offense. A sack is worth negative 1.8 points for an offense. A pressure is worth 0.3 of a point for a defense.
6 times. The sack is 6 times more valuable than a pressure.
So I agree with you guys that, hey, these guys got to get to the quarterback. It means nothing, or it means 6 times less to get to the passer and then not make a play than it does to get to the passer and make a play. And we saw that in 2018. That's why the team went 12-4, even though the defense was terrible. They actually got sacks. This 2022 team needs to get sacks. And so I agree with you. But Dunlap has gotten to the quarterback 18 times the last 2 years between Cincinnati and Seattle.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Since 2018, Melvin Ingram, the guy who essentially Dunlap is replacing. If we go back to last year, Karlaftis is then the depth piece after the draft, but the veteran presence, however you want to form it up. He's had, I think I looked it up, and it was 31.5 sacks since 18, where Melvin Ingram had 16 or 15.5, something like that. So he basically doubled the sack production of Melvin Ingram. And, you'd have thought in this town, Melvin Ingram had 2 sacks last year, one with Pittsburgh and one with the Chiefs. And again, I understand pressures are important, especially a pressure that forces a quarterback to throw the ball into the ground. But in Kansas City, Chiefs fans, you'd have thought Melvin Ingram was like, how are they letting Reggie White in his prime go with some of them? It's like, oh my God. I mean, you got to re-sign Melvin Ingram. I'm like, Melvin Ingram didn't do anything. I want to point something out. Melvin Ingram, what was the number he ended up signing for in Miami? Was it 5 or 6 million? 1 year, 5 or 6 million? Because Dunlap got reportedly around 8. What's going to be upwards could go even a little bit higher. Some of the incentives, you get what you pay for. And I think the Chiefs, I was hearing that the Chiefs have been after Dunlap since back in the spring. And I think this is the important component that should scare the rest of the league, is that they put this offer together or something pretty similar in the spring. Dunlap said, let me look around. He looked around at Miami. Seattle was on the board. There are a couple other different places. Carolina, I heard, had interest, maybe some more teams. And at the end of the day, the Chiefs held their water, right? They didn't say, okay, well, whatever it takes. Oh, we lost on Melvin Ingram. We're going to get, we're going to go out and put, whatever it takes to keep Melvin Ingram. But no, they just stayed patient and played the long game, and they ended up getting Dunlap. They're the team with Mahomes. They're the team that's a perennial Super Bowl contender. And I think if you're the Chargers, the Broncos, those teams that are at their all-in moment, and they should be because they've been getting their nose bloodied by the Chiefs for years in that division. But the Chiefs didn't, blow their wad. Like they played it smart and ultimately got their guy. And that's scary, I think, Jeff, if you're those other teams, that they're able to get the guy they wanted and get him at the price that they wanted him at too, right? Eventually they stay patient as opposed to, overpaying to make sure you get Sammy Watkins. And I have no problem with that deal in its moment. 48 years since you've won a Super Bowl, right? That's the time to go do it. But now they've won it. They've got that street cred. They've got that equity, and they're using it to their advantage.
So do you think Dunlap exponentially makes them better? Is that what you're saying here? That he puts them on a different level now?
No.
Okay.
I think the way they signed Dunlap shows that they are not going to screw this thing up, right? They didn't because they wanted him by at least what I was hearing over the last couple of days. They wanted him going back to the spring. Like this basic deal was available to him in the spring. And the fact that they waited and waited and waited and waited and watched Melvin Ingram go and watched other maneuvers make and never came off of what it was that they thought the man was worth and then ultimately got him is a scary thing, because if I'm the Broncos or Chargers, I want the Chiefs to slap out another mega contract somewhere. I want them to turn their cap upside down. And they didn't do that. There's no such thing as a bad one-year deal. In fact, they even were so patient, they're tacking on another $3 million of future Kelsey cost into this year, which will make his contract even better in the future. So they're getting some future cap out of the way now. I think that's an incredibly patient and smart way to build your football team. And if I'm the challengers in the AFC, I'm kind of worried that they're not making this is, they're making smart moves.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if teams see it that way. I was in Denver today and I was talking to some people over there about it feels that the Chiefs feel like they're finding motivation in the talk about they're going to take a step back without Tyreek and the offense won't be the same, that they're acting like they're the underdogs a little bit now. And the response I got from front office guy over there said they're not the underdogs. They got the coach, they got the quarterback, everybody's chasing them.
Right.
So, yeah, to your point, there is certainly a respect for what they've done and what they can do. I don't know if Carlos Dunlap signing changes the way people feel about them. I think until they aren't the AFC West champions, they will be, highly respected. If they don't win the AFC West this year, they will still command that kind of respect because they have the coach and they have the quarterback. But the point you're making about how they're managing their money is valid in that they are not acting as if every year they got to go out there and hit all these home runs, to do what the Yankees do in baseball. Let's just go pay a whole bunch of money to guys and see what sticks. They're being very selective about how they're handling their finances. I think they've been very smart about the Hill situation, about the Matthew situation, the Orlando Brown situation, and yes, now the Carlos Dunlap situation. And some of that comes from the comfort of knowing, yes, we do have a championship. We don't have to go out and prove ourselves as much anymore. We're far more comfortable with what we have. I suspect this move has a lot more to do with just giving George Karlaftis a little more time to develop and not having to rush and pressure him into being something that he may not become for a couple of years. And so, yeah, I like the move. I like the finances. I don't put as much stock into the idea of other teams, panicking or being freaked out by how they're doing their salary cap. I think they're just being very prudent.
I don't think panic or freaked out. I just think I'd be disappointed because I would want the Chiefs to make a bad move, right? Like I want them to be blowing their cap up, and that's not what they did, right? They obviously had a need, and when you heard that, I think you worry, like, okay, you really want to see them grossly overpay for someone who's not that good, right? And that's not what they did.
They've done that in the past.
That's what I'm saying.
They've made those moves, They're not doing it now,
They didn't do it now, and that to me is where one of the things, where the opportunity was there. That's now gone. They're definitely a better team now, right? They're better with them. I put the comment up. 38% of the snaps is what Dunlap played last year. I mean, situational pass rusher. What you hope is maybe this also brings down the number of snaps that Frank Clark has to play, and they're both made better by the fact that they can not have to go at it as much.
Yeah, I suspect. I wonder how Eric feels about that. I think this says more about where they're at with the Michael Danas and the Kane Does and those players in that second tier. That okay, who can we trust here to give us something? Because Spagnuolo loves to have a pretty good rotation of players, and we saw last year when they were really struggling, they didn't have those young guys who would come in and give them really good snaps. So, not just Karlaftis being able to grow, but just really not being able to trust what's behind those guys is probably part of this as well.
Yeah, I think you couldn't trust Dana last year to get a pressure on the quarterback. You couldn't trust Clark. Ingram was kind of there, right? So you go Dunlap, Karlaftis on late downs. You give yourself more of a chance, right? And then like Frank Clark can kind of do some of the things that he's good at, which is like setting the edge on early downs. I think this rounds out the defense far better than what they had last year.
For sure. All right, let's move on to Kyler Murray's contract. Today he felt a need to have an impromptu press conference and basically say, I don't know where this is coming from. Like, why is everybody getting on me? It's insulting to say that they've got to include a clause to make me study that I don't take this game seriously. I always take it serious. I always prepare. Well, that's great. How on God's earth did Kyler Murray allow that clause to be in the contract? I said this yesterday when the word started coming out about that, or maybe it was Monday, whenever it was Tuesday, whenever the contract came out. I said, if you're Kyler Murray, how do you sign a contract that has that clause in it? Because it contracts always get out there. So everything that's in your contract is going to be known. If you don't know that, shame on you. You're not paying attention to your own business, to your own industry, to certainly not your position. And how those contracts always get out there. And secondly, if you're the Arizona Cardinals and you find yourself feeling a need to put that into a contract, Jeff, you've got to go, wait a minute. We can't, if we have to even write this down, we can't give this kind of money to this guy, right? Like, this is bad on both sides, in my opinion.
I think if you go back to how this whole thing started in the spring, around the combine time, and let's not forget, Eric Burkhart, his agent, was very aggressive in saying he's not playing unless he gets a new deal. Right? This is what their feeling was. It was a surprise move. I think everybody felt like this is progressing nicely for them. He's growing. Certainly, he's had his struggles, but he's coming along. And they were like, "We want him to get paid now," and the Cardinals were like, "We're not feeling that." And there was all this to do about whether he was going to show up for the offseason program, whether he was going to be playing, holding out in training camp. And so I think that set the stage for what this became. Ian Rappaport at my place had talked to Michael Bidwell, the Cardinals owner, and pretty much said what we all assumed was the Cardinals were not very comfortable with paying him that kind of money. And this was their way of hedging their bets. Now, I agree with you. If you have to put that in his contract, something's wrong. If you are signing that deal, and I still have questions about how much his agent, if that's my agent and I don't know that's in my contract, my agent should be saying this is crazy. We can't be doing this. Right, this is ridiculous. Right. And so I question the communication there. Now you can come out and be all upset because people are questioning your work ethic now, but it's not the media, not the public, it's your boss. It's in black and white in your contract. They are questioning your work ethic. So I don't know where he's coming from. And I know I've talked to Kyler Murray. I know some of the things that have happened. That organization, there's a lot of dysfunction right now around that team. But you have to own it at this point and assume something you're doing ain't right.
Yeah. Eric, how do you even enforce a clause like this? Like what is cameras in his house and a stopwatch on when he starts studying? I mean,
well, before Eric answers, I will tell you this, and this came up when I was in Denver. Apparently, that's how they busted Paxton Lynch and realized he wasn't the answer because all these tablets they giving people, they know they can track what you're doing and not doing. So there is a way to quantify it.
So it's in there. It tracks your usage. Okay, good to know.
I think the biggest problem here is that you gave Keim and Kingsbury a extension first, when in reality, the only reason that those two dudes have a job is because Kyler Murray got this team to a level of competence that you would not expect from a quarterback who's any less than him, right? So to me, the issue was you gave Keim and Kingsbury extensions, you have to give Murray an extension. And then that Murray extension was going to always yield something that was weird because he was clearly not doing necessarily what he needed to do to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL, right? I mean, like that's the problem.
I think he's the guy that's good enough. Like there are quarterbacks that are good and they can win you some games and they can even stand toe-to-toe with the best in the league. But are you a guy that's going to, put your team into multiple championship games? Or are you a guy that might get them there once when everything goes perfect? Joe Flacco, Matt Ryan, sometimes that you cash, sometimes you don't, depending upon who your opponent is when you get there. But I think this is clearly a statement that they're not even believing themselves, but they know they got to sell tickets. Like this is the business side of it. Right. He helps them sell tickets. I don't think he helps them win a championship. Criticism of Lamar Jackson continues. Jeff, do you have a reaction to the latest on Lamar?
I think you're, what is it, Thunder Lips and what's the other guy?
By interns?
Yeah, your interns are probably out there ghostwriting commentary, feeding it to the Athletic to put in the quotes. Look, the quote that's gotten a lot of run is about him, whatever. If he wins 12 MVPs, he'll never be a one. That Lamar Jackson is always going to be polarizing. And I've always fallen on the side of there's a lot of ways to play football. There's a lot of ways to play quarterback. And I think we've gotten to a place now where if you don't win a championship, it's open season on your resume, on your legacy, on your playing ability. There's a lot of great quarterbacks who don't win championships, who have never gone to a Super Bowl. And so I think first thing we have to do is establish, do we think he's a great quarterback? And then we have to establish, do we think he's a quarterback who can win a championship? And do the two have to coincide or coexist for us to be able to make an all-encompassing assessment of what Lamar Jackson is as a player? The problem I have with the comment is that the guy's won an MVP. The guy's played at a high level. He's won, 37 out of 49 games he started. They built an entire offense around him that's continued to function. Everybody in that locker room loves the guy. Yeah, is he Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers? No. Will he ever be that? I don't think so. But I also don't discredit what he's done and see him as a lesser talent just because he doesn't play the quarterback the same way those guys do.
I mean, isn't like to whom much is given, much is expected, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing here. Like, are you supposed to pay a guy 95% of Patrick Mahomes or 105% of Patrick Mahomes, and then you can't say anything negative about him, or you can't have expectations?
Oh no, yeah.
And I know you're not saying that, but I'm wondering if this is the thought process that people want to get paid like guys who have won championships.
Yeah.
But if you're going to take that check, what comes with it is the expectation that you will win championships. I think when we talk about the legacy of Lamar Jackson and is he a great quarterback, everybody has their own criteria. For me, to be a great quarterback in the NFL, you do have to win a championship. Otherwise, I'll call you very good. I'll call you good. I'll call you electric, lots of things, rocket armed, but great. No, you got to eventually win a championship because I think there's more to just the on the field. It's your ability to maybe take a little less, to let your team be better, right? That's part of the equation, to make guys around you better, to be a leader, to not be a distraction. I think he falls short on one. He's a distraction for a lot of different reasons. None of them criminal. He's not a bad human being, but I don't know that, how many, how do guys get when they have to answer question after question after question about a guy? His contract is a constant drama. Get it done. I mean, it takes two to tango. I think this is similar to Arizona. I think he wants to get paid. And I think Baltimore doesn't have better right now. And they know they're going to have to pay him, but I don't think they love making him the highest paid quarterback. So I get it. And in the context, I think it was Mike Sando's piece that this came from with the tier ones, because he does the quarterback tiers. And I think the reaction is there that like, hey, the tier ones are for championship quarterbacks. He wants to be paid like those guys, but I don't think he'll ever win a championship. I think that is what that statement boils down to, doesn't it?
Yeah. Eric, do you want to jump in here?
I think it's really rough that the Arizona Cardinals, now they started out in 2018. they were like 3 or 4 tenths of a yard per play worse than any other team in the NFL. And so Kingsbury, Murray, they get them up to like middle of the pack. They get them up to average. And then in the first halves of the last 2 seasons, they get that team to like pretty good. And then they fade at the end. This team has improved under Kingsbury and Murray, but they've won 0 playoff games. I think when you look at, the Bengals with Burrow, the Chiefs obviously with Mahomes, you look at, the Seattle Seahawks with Russell Wilson, this is multiple Super Bowl appearances, and then you give the quarterback a big deal.
Right.
The Cardinals have given Murray a big deal without the benefit of any real team-level results. The team has gone from horrible to okay. But now you're paying a ton for okay. Do we think that this team can elevate themselves from okay now that you're paying the quarterback a lot of money? I'm selling this.
Yeah, and that's the statement about Lamar Jackson, right? It's the exact same thing. Like if you pay
look, Lamar won an MVP. That team had a first-round bye. They won a first-round playoff game. Lamar has not gotten what Murray has gotten, but he also has gotten more. Like he's won some playoff games. I count the first-round bye as a win. I count the Tennessee game as a win. He's at least advanced his team in the playoffs. So I would be more happy to give him a deal, even if I'm a little tepid about it, than I would be Murray, who's gotten his team to nowhere despite the fact that his team was able to get a $27 million APY deal to his star wide receiver because he was on a rookie deal. I just don't – I think they're a little different. I think they're on the same side of the line that Soren's trying to draw, though, even though they're separate.
I mean, that's like you talk about the contract that's coming. I mean, most people saw Kyler Murray's deal and said, well, boy, Lamar Jackson's got a smile, because most people think Lamar Jackson's going to get even more, don't they, Jeff?
Well, I believe that. But I also say this: what separates Lamar Jackson from Kyler Murray is the fact that he's still out there. He's still out there playing and he hasn't made the demand after whatever year 3 to say, give me my money. If they said we want to pay him, we want to work with him, but it wasn't like, I'm not going to go out there. And in fact, he went out there and played in year 4. He played hurt. He played with a broken team that lost several of its key playmakers, almost got them to the playoffs by themselves. I just think at some point, I think we always tend to have revisionist history when it comes to how we look at the quarterback position. I think somebody threw up Dan Marino's name as an example, Steve Cashman as an example of a quarterback who didn't win a championship, who most people look at as one of the top 5 quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL. I think there's a lot of things that go into winning a championship that aren't necessarily about the quarterback you have playing. Like the Chiefs, for example, Patrick Mahomes didn't go out there in the Super Bowl and have like a 25 for 30, 400-yard, 5-touchdown day. He had a very mediocre day by his standards, but the team around him played well. And that's ultimately what ends up happening when you win championships. Your whole team has to play at a high level. And so with Lamar Jackson, I think you look at his history. When his team has been healthy, they've played well. And when his team hasn't been healthy, they haven't played well.
Let's get to you mentioned Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I think to win a championship, the whole team has to play well. Some guys can have off days and other guys can get carried. Like I think if you go to the championship, the 2019 championship, the Chiefs won, he had a monster day against the Texans and they needed it. Down 24-0. He had to put on the cape and he put it on. Right now, there's always somebody catching the ball. A quarterback throws for 450 yards. He didn't catch it too. Right. So, I mean, I will give you that. But I think, to your point, yeah, it wasn't like a lot of people after the Super Bowl was over said, well, why isn't Damian Williams the MVP? Right. Like that was a popular thought. So to your point, yes, it wasn't his best day, but he has.
So what if he had lost that game? How would we look at him right now? Would we be saying, can he win the big one, or would we be saying he's going to win one?
Well, I think you'd be saying both. I think he's going to win the big one, but right now he hasn't won the big one. I don't think you can't win the big one until you start getting to your like 28, 29. But he'd be getting real close to hearing that.
Yeah.
I mean, you agree?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. If he had that moment and gotten back against Tampa and it had this offensive line situation, fall apart on him, and then all of a sudden it's like, would you sit there and say, "Oh, this guy just can't do it"? Or would you be like, "He just had some horrible luck"? Or
I think you could turn that around, and we're going to get to the comments about Patrick Mahomes here in a second. But I think you could turn that around because think of last year. Last year, through 2.5 games of playoff football, he had thrown 11 touchdowns and 1 interception. I think Eric even made this point a couple of weeks ago, and had thrown for the better part of close to 1,000 yards, 800 plus yards in 2.5 games, and then they do nothing in the second half. Like if that second half isn't there, and he pushes into his 3rd consecutive Super Bowl, win or lose, and I think he would have given the Rams every bit of game, if not won it. How different are we saying? You're right. If he doesn't get that first Super Bowl win, it looks different. But we're even now. To me, we're where we ought to be with the guy. Maybe he got a bit of a kiss, like Chris Jones batted pass and a big completion. Jet chip wasp. Kind of bailed him out there early. Well, yeah, the inability for the Chiefs as a team, because let's be clear, he didn't play well in the second half, but didn't anybody step up and carry the kid across the finish line in the second half for the Chiefs either? There was no pick six to save the day. There was no 78-yard pop it at the line of scrimmage and take it the distance. There was no, shovel pass that turned the corner. Like nobody else got up and answered the bell in the second half either. So by my measure, you play long enough, it all starts to balance out, right? The kid's where he ought to be right now. 1 Super Bowl loss, 2 more AFC championship games. That's who he is. I don't think he's lucky, but I don't think he's unlucky either. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, but I also look at Lamar Jackson, and we'll get to Mahomes in a second. I look at Michael Vick as being a really good example of what Lamar Jackson's career could play out if it goes in the right direction, where you have a guy who was super athletic. I think Lamar Jackson's a better passer now than Michael Vick was at this stage of his career. And when you looked at Michael Vick after he got with Andy Reid and Marty Mornhinweg, when he came out of jail, he became a different player, a completely different player. And so what I say is there's a very good possibility that a guy with Lamar Jackson's work ethic, with his determination, can become that. And then I totally agree with the fact that he's not a good enough passer right now to win the kind of games that someone just mentioned, the Bills-Chiefs playoff game last year. I totally agree with that. But I also don't say you can't become that at some point later in your career.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, I actually think Lamar's probably a better passer than Vic was. And, his running is different, right? When Michael Vick rushed for 1,000 yards in 2006, like 25% of it was design stuff, right? It was stuff that was called at the line of scrimmage. Everything else was scrambles. 68% of Lamar's rushing yards in 2019 were on designed runs, meaning like that they were running back type of plays. So I even think Lamar is just like a statistical outlier there. As a passer, you're looking at like 64% completion. You're looking at huge efficiency levels that, to Jeff's point, you're not seeing in other guys like that. So I'll reserve reservation. I think the hard part about Lamar Jackson is when you're up against Josh Allen, when you're up against Patrick Mahomes, when you're up against Tom Brady, he's going to be a step below, right? So to put him in the Bills-Chiefs playoff game, to me, it's unfair only because of how good Josh Allen is and how good how good Patrick Mahomes is. But that step below, and look, we saw the Chiefs lose to the Bengals last year. So there's going to be opportunity at times during the career of Lamar Jackson to play in a game because a team like the Bills or a team like the Chiefs lost a game that they shouldn't have lost. I think Lamar Jackson, his unique style of play, you look at the tracking data and things like that, he forces linebackers to play differently than any other quarterback does. Again, I put him below Josh Allen. I put him below our guy, Patrick Mahomes. But if those guys falter, I think he is unique and good enough to take advantage.
Yeah, he can win you can win a championship with Lamar Jackson.
You can, but I wouldn't. Look, here's the point. If I were the Chiefs and I could choose between Mahomes and Lamar, who would I choose? 10 times out of 10, I choose Mahomes.
Yeah.
But Lamar is good enough to win a championship. And I think he's a step ahead of guys like Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts and all the guys we compare him to because of the sheer talent he has running the football between the tackles. And he led the NFL the last 3 years in yards per carry before contact. That is a big, when we talk about gaining yards before the defense even has a chance to contact you, that's Lamar Jackson. That's the running backs. I think J.K. Dobbins was 7th. Gus Edwards was 19th. Those are the players that Lamar is helping out by his gravity.
Right.
It's not the same gravity as Mahomes, but it's a gravity that works, most of the time in the NFL.
Yeah, you can win a championship with Lamar Jackson, but he's probably not going to beat Patrick Mahomes, beat Josh Allen, and then beat Aaron Rodgers, right? No. He needs Derek Carr to take down Patrick Mahomes, and then he gets Derek Carr. Maybe he gets Joe Burrow in the conference championship game, and then there's been an upset over on the NFC side, and Aaron Rodgers loses yet another NFC championship game, and Jimmy Garoppolo is waiting for him. That's the kind of championship that's probably going to be won by Lamar Jackson. I want to get to the Patrick Mahomes comment because I don't even know if this one. I mean, are we? What do we make of the comment that here's the quote? And this again comes from the quarterback tiers that Mike Sando wrote. He said, "Nothing against the guy. I love the kid. Take his first read away, and what does he do? He runs, he scrambles, and he plays street ball." Right? That's Shannon Sharp's. That was they were playing that. I'm sorry, it wasn't Shannon Sharp. He just reacted to it. I'm sorry, but that was a long. I think it was a long time defensive play caller. Is what said that. What's your reaction to that comment, Jeff?
Well, I said this on A10 earlier today with Stephen St. John. I brought this up a couple years ago. First of all, it's we all can agree he's a phenomenal player. He's a generational talent. All that stuff you want to say about Mahomes is true. Just because you have some flaws doesn't mean that you are a lesser player, right? Tom Brady doesn't like pressure in his face. Doesn't mean he's not a tier 2 quarterback because he can't handle a defensive tackle chasing him out of the pocket. But you go back 2020 season when they played the Falcons, and I brought this up then. There was a defensive coach on that staff after they almost beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead and gave Mahomes fits that day, who said, you can still fool him. He's a great player, but there's some things he doesn't see as well as people think. So that, I think, there is a shred of truth in that. I don't know if it's as simple as first read, he's going to go run for his life, but the Bengals did it, obviously, in the second half. I think it has more to do. It's not an IQ thing. I think it's an aggression thing. I think he likes the big play. I think he likes to go after the kill shot. And sometimes when you're wired that way, it can make it harder for you to succeed as a quarterback. And I've had people say to me that even throwing on time, this is the big challenge for him. The thing the Chiefs want to see from him this year, which he did well at the end of last year, until that second half of the AFC Championship game, is throwing on time. They said that's something that drives Bieniemy crazy, is that when the play is called, you got to throw to your first read, whatever it is. He's too quick to say, all right, I'll go. But wait a minute. I got a 7-yard play down the field. I want to throw that instead. So I think it's more, it's less of an intelligence thing or a reading defense thing. It's more about just trying to, it's a willpower thing. It's a willfulness.
Is the comment street ball a slap in the face or a slap on the back? Right? Because in some ways, I will tell you, you coach basketball and you have, that's the most recent sport I coach. You have a point guard that can go get you a bucket. Okay, here's our offense. We're going to run it. Oh, that went to hell in a handbasket. Oh, my point guard just, crossed over 2 players and went to the rim and laid it in. I'm a brilliant coach, right? We came down, we got it done. I think for play callers, because he can beat you with his legs, because he is athletic enough to do that and still throw with great touch, and I think still see the field. I think it's a little bit, they practice the scramble, the fire drill of what happens after the first or second read goes away. And I think he probably does duck out too much. But I also think there's times he saves Andy Reid's ass. He saves Eric Bieniemy's bacon. Right?
Patrick Mahomes is the best scrambler in the NFL.
Well, and that's my point is that I don't think are there things they'd like him to do? Are there reads that he misses? Sure. Are there times there was an easier 7-yard gain and he goes for that 20-yarder and then it's not there and then we're scrambling around and trying to have, yes. And I think he's got to, through experience.
But are there also plays like against the Chargers on Thursday Night Football where he runs for 40 yards because
well, but that's my point is
the open field?
Yeah, that's my point is the times that he bails out Bieniemy and Andy Reid, who don't need a lot of bailing out, but everyone does. Every coach does, right? The times that he bails it out and they're moving the chains and getting to the next genius play on the play sheet because just his raw ability grossly outweigh any times he's setting him back. Can we all agree on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's as simple as that. And I'm not trying to make an argument that he's playing street ball or that he's a lesser quarterback. Like I said, he's a phenomenal quarterback. I just think that knowing how defenses are in the NFL, how defensive coaches think that no matter what you do well, this applies to Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, whoever it is. I mean, every quarterback in this league is going to have some rough patches. They're going to use your tendencies against you sooner or later. And so what I think he struggled last year, you saw teams using that desire to get out of the pocket and make things happen to their advantage, to where, okay, run this way, and we know what you're going to do here. We can put you in a position where we know you'll throw the football if you see a certain thing or you're in a certain spot, a certain time in the game. And that's where a lot of his turnovers came from. If you go back and watch, especially that Chargers game, that last interception he threw, he rolled to his right. He wasn't that – he could have stayed in the pocket. And he basically – all his receivers were going to the other side of the field. He had one receiver to throw to, which was Travis Kelce, 4 defenders. He threw it up. That's something that defenses begin to figure out about you, that you will do those things if you're tempted. And so really that's where his discipline has to come in. He's going to have to – because again, and the same thing with the AFC Championship game. Like, okay, the play's not there. Throw the football away, kick a field goal. That's just maybe it's who he is. Maybe you can get it out of him, but it certainly is a problem. And no matter how many ways you want to say 4 AFC Championship games, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 championship, when you lose those games, it still hurts.
Yeah.
When we lose what games though?
AFC Championship last year.
Yeah, like once. And then like 2 years in between, they won both of them. The Bills.
Who talks about that now, though? Outside of Kansas City, they're not talking about that outside of Kansas City.
I agree with you that Mahomes isn't like. I think that the point is when you are the best player in the league, and let's be honest, Mahomes is the best player in the league. There's always going to be people who want to knock that player down a peg, and there's always this idea like, look. Dan Marino, I got to remember the number. I think it was like 20. He took 22 sacks in like a 3-year stretch. He had 6. He took 6 sacks in like 1990 or something like that. Like an egregious number. Everybody wants to look at Mahomes and say, okay, like I'm going to take this sliver of data and oh my God, he struggles here. The whole league adjusted to Patrick Mahomes, ran too high stuff. Mess with his receiver, his top receiver who had 23 drops the last 2 years because he was running underneath stuff. Patrick is still and has been for 2 years now the best scrambler in all of football. They want to say, okay, he should be able to win here. And the league has said, no, we're not going to let you win here with the personnel that you have. And so he said, okay, I'm going to run for first downs. And then now the league says, okay, but that's street ball. This is where I get a little bit irritated at the narrative of Patrick Mahomes because he can't win, right? He blow torches the league in 2018. Every single year since then, his yards per attempt have gone down. Every single year since then, his scramble, how good he's been as a scrambler has gone up. How good he's been at adapting to NFL defenses has gone up. And then now all these people want to say, oh, he's not great because he can't do X, Y, and Z, which the reason he can't do X, Y, and Z is because these defenses are taking it away because he did it better than anyone in 2018. That's where I get a little irritated on the Patrick Mahomes stuff because, and again, I was there. I rode to the game with Jeff. I know they lost the AFC Championship game, but they hosted another AFC Championship game despite the fact that the league took all of the last 18 months to stop this team on offense and the Chiefs still made it to the AFC title game, beat the best offense in football. I'm still, and like, look, you can call me a homer, but I'm still here saying Patrick Mahomes is pretty damn good.
I'll call you a homer for
But
sure.
nobody's saying that that's not the case. That's the whole point. Nobody's saying he's not pretty good.
Right. But they're just.
But the whole thing, by the way, Patrick Mahomes, PFF grade after his first read, first in the NFL. Yards per attempt after his first read, first in the NFL. These are things that we chart at PFF. Like the anonymous scout that says once you get him past his first read, he's ass. No, like that is actually not true. Like that's actually not true, right? Like relative to the rest. Look, Patrick Mahomes is good no matter what the slice of data is. It's just that Patrick Mahomes has been the king of the league, and every single team, the Fangio defenses are designed to beat Patrick Mahomes.
I think there are two things. And by the way, if we had to put money on who made that statement, who would you put it on?
Jack Del Rio. I mean, 100%.
I put it on Vic Fangio.
I think Jack Del Rio said that on the steps of the Capitol early 2021. Early.
Listen, I bring it up twofold. One, you got to remember, listen, in 2018, calling Patrick Mahomes great, it was a competition to go you got clicks, right? You got viewers, you got listeners by saying Mahomes is good. Then you had to say he was great. Then you had to say he was the best. And I remember Max Kellerman about 10 games into the season said Patrick Mahomes is already the greatest quarterback that's ever played the game. That's where we were in 18. And when people listen to that, they get enough and they say, okay, then they begin to respond to those people, right? And so now how do you get clicks? You don't get clicks by going, Mahomes is the best. You get clicks by coming up with those slivers of data you're talking about that say he's not the best, because that's the compelling literature. It's just the natural ebb and flow. We've seen it with every other quarterback. I think what's interesting from the defensive coordinator is I think back to when Gunther Cunningham coached his first game as the head coach of the Chiefs, and he lost to the Bears. I think it was week 1. And he lost to the Bears playing air raid football with Eric Kramer, I think it was, at quarterback. And they were 4 wide. It's like run and shoot air raid / football. And the Chiefs were supposed to beat them. They didn't. And afterwards, Gunther Cunningham was, well, you play that fake football. You try to do that. Like it was like, no, this doesn't count because they played fake football, right? And defensive coordinators, they run their scheme. They did everything they wanted. They took away Tyreek Hill. They took away this. They beat Andy Reid, and they're proud of themselves, and they feel good. And then Mahomes beat their guy to the outside and still got the first down, and they're pissed because they did their job, right? The general manager didn't do his job to get enough talent to stop him. And so that's where that comment comes from, because they know that they can be their best, and he can still beat him, right? So you got to ding him for something. I think it's sour grapes is what it is. I think it's a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think we live in a time where it's just perspective goes out the window. It's hard to be nuanced. It's okay to say Patrick Mahomes has flaws. It's okay to say he's great. It's the same conversation as Lamar Jackson, just with a different spin on it, because it's about how do you want to define somebody,
right?
And if you want to say, I did a podcast a month ago, and the question I got was, do you think like people are getting ahead of themselves with the guys like Justin Herbert and the Joe Burrows and the Josh Allens who haven't won championships, and we're all ready to anoint these guys? Do you think that's fair? And I said, well, hey, when Mahomes was playing his first year, he was going to win 8 championships in a row. It was like, that's what we do. And so, I think your point is valid. There is some backlash that comes with that, but somewhere in the middle, there is truth. I mean, it's okay to say he's a phenomenal player. It's okay to say he can be defended. It doesn't have to be.
It's in the middle, Jeff. I think they're both true. It's all true. It's all a part of him, right? Some days he doesn't win. Some days you tip your cap. The other team got him. He's always great. He has flaws like everybody, right? All of that's true. That's all of what makes him compelling. I didn't want to highlight this because I'm glad Matt brought this up. I did say this back in 18. I said, are you ready to become the villain? Because it is coming. And that's for Patrick Mahomes. That's for Chiefs fans. Everybody loved the Chiefs in 18. And even in 19, they were kind of a darling. But once you've been there for a while and done it, people want to tear you down. Or they get tired of you. They want the new flavor, the new thing. That's just the natural progression of what happens in the NFL.
Hey, that's the Dallas Cowboys every year way of life.
Yeah.
And they haven't won jack in 2 decades.
Is Tyreek Hill's mouth making him the villain? Like he just won't stop, Jeff. There's just the podcast. You got to have an episode every week, as we know, right? Yeah. And Tyreek Hill keeps firing.
Need to fill that space, man.
Yeah. So what do we think? Is Tyreek Hill gonna run himself out of Miami in like a year after all the crap he's talking and all the pressure he's putting on Tua?
Look, he's in a good place to be talking as much as he's talking. And what you're seeing without the money, imagine it's him without the big paycheck in Kansas City. This is what the Chiefs were concerned about, or one of their concerns with him not having a big deal going into his final year in the contract, that he was capable of being what he's become now, which is somebody who wants to have a lot of attention, wants to be a headliner, wants to be on Get Up and First Take and all that stuff. And look, a lot of this is just for fun. A lot of it's just him just trying to enjoy his money and his new home and his new team. I don't think it puts any more pressure on Tua Tagovailoa than there's already on him. It's you may read into it that he's trying to find a way to hype him up and make him feel better and more confident. But ultimately, Tua's got to go out and play. No matter what they're saying about him on his team or outside of the team, he's got to go out there and deliver. I'm one of those people who thinks that they are a better team than that people are giving them credit for. I think they will play better. I suspect Mike McDaniel's probably a pretty good coach, could have some Matt LaFleur in him as far as being able to run a team and get the best out of a team. I like the pieces around Tua. But, Stephen St. John asked me the question the other day, will the Dolphins regret that trade for Tua? For Tyreek. And I said, you can't quantify this trade just by numbers. I think he's trying to give them some swag. He's trying to give them a sense of belief that, look, I've been on a championship team. I've seen what it takes. Yeah, maybe I'll be the bad guy in all this, but I'm getting paid a ton of money. I can afford to be the bad guy here. And so that's how I think he looks at it.
I think he likes attention, which we all do, yeah. Right? I think.
I mean,
the fact that this is a calculated.
Yeah, you can.
The fact that this is a calculated play to motivate his team, I don't know that I would give him that kind of credit. Is there any data that suggests Tua could rise and be one of the greats in the league this year? Is there any chance he breaks out, Eric?
Yeah, let me give you a little bit. So Jimmy G last year had what we call 2 big-time throws. So PFF has big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays. You can sort of think of them as touchdowns, interceptions. Jimmy G last year in the 10 to 19 range, so 10 to 19 yards, 2 big-time throws, 15 turnover-worthy plays. So he was terrible throwing to 10 to 19 range. And yet, on those plays, he had a 106, 107 passer rating on those plays.
So what do you say? He got lucky?
Well, or the plays that worked, right? The coach, the Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan scheme put that thin region of play into play for Jimmy G, even though he sucked. Tua Tagovailoa on those plays, 2 big-time throws, 9 turnover-worthy plays. So just as bad, or, whatever, as Jimmy G. But he only had a 68.7 passer rating on those plays. You put the coach in the place there. You put Tua there. Maybe there's a way to take that kind of horrible play that you both saw from Jimmy G and Tua and get positive sort of play out of that, right? It wasn't like Jimmy G was amazing for the Niners and Tua has to replicate that amazing play for the Dolphins. He has to replicate just like get on the green kind of play, and that type of offensive scheme can give you positive play. I'm still skeptical. I have bets on Miami's under, but that is the positive play for the Miami Dolphins in 2022.
All right, we'll see if that happens.
I think they're betting on a dimension that the Chiefs used at the start of Mahomes' career, which is a lot of speed on the field. But instead of having the big arm to stretch you deep, they're relying, and it's why Tyreek Hill keeps talking about the accuracy. they're hoping that Tua is an accurate enough guy in the short game that yards after catch become a big part of what they want to do. I think that's it. People are overblowing the whole he can't throw it 70 yards thing. I think it's all about can he be on time with the football.
Right. Jeff, how does are we any closer to knowing how the Deshaun Watson situation ends up?
I think at this point it's all about a woman making a decision after spending all this time talking to him. Look, he's going to miss games. He's probably going to at least miss 6 games just based on the precedent that's been set by the league here. And the question that's always been, lingering about all of this is what's the comfort level with the Browns with all of this in terms of this season? My sense of it is that they feel like this is a long-term play here. That, okay, even if this season doesn't end up being great for them, they've got their hands on a quarterback who is potentially a top 5, top 6 quarterback in this league, or has been at that level before he missed a year. And they can weather that storm. After Baker, what they've gone through with that, what they've done to that roster, if they get him for 10 games, 8 games, and they're able to finish on the right side of 500, I think that's a win for them. I think they know that this was going to be about more winning over fans than it was going to be about winning a championship this year.
Yeah. At some point, though, if you're in Cleveland, you're like, come on, let's just get to it. Yeah. What is it going to be? Let's figure it out and move forward.
Yeah.
That to me is like this is going like I'm tired of it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm not even in Cleveland, right?
But it's always been murky, right?
I
mean, it's always been murky, and no one wants to talk about that part of it. And it's not to diminish the allegations, but just everything about it, from the teams, the Texans' involvement in it, to the timing of the allegations, to the numbers, to the things he was doing. It's messy all the way around. And so I can see why it's hard to go in there and just find a definitive answer about what this should be.
Eric, Mike McCarthy has critics. He obviously has feelings too, because they get hurt pretty easily. I mean, I don't know if he's shocked by the line of questioning that he's getting as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Well, I go back to what Lou Holtz said. I took over a team that was losing and I turned them into a winning team. And they said, no, you silly man. I want you to win all the games. He said, then I won all the games. But we didn't win the championship. He said, no, we want you to win all the games and the championship. Like when you take the Cowboys job, this is what the expectation is. So you can't.
I never saw Barry Switzer complaining that much.
Yeah, you can't get all upset about this. And I like Mike McCarthy. He's got ties. He's went to Baker, so he's got local ties here. But like, how much are his critics right? Like when you look at the analysis of what he does as a coach, are they right to question him, or does he do a lot more well than as opposed to bad?
I think he's much better than a terrible coach. I think he's much worse than a great coach.
Okay.
And unfortunately that hurts you when you get a great team in your group. Like you get a Green Bay and ultimately that team is capable of these things, and you get them to these things. Dallas, when, last year they won 12 games, they lose in the first round to a team that won 10 games. I think McCarthy's a decent head coach. I think he's a good man. I've met him before. I've helped him at PFF before. I was infamous in the Peter King story. That was me in the room, and I think he's a great person, and I think he tries to understand football better than a lot of people. But I think there's always like that little bit that keeps him from being a Super Bowl coach. And he's won a Super Bowl before. So, and that, as somebody who grew up in Eastern Minnesota, like a lot of my family's from Western Wisconsin, a lot of them love the Packers. So like he's made a lot of them happy. So like far be it from me to like really ding him that much. But I think that the hard part is I think McCarthy's a playoff caliber coach who's not a Super Bowl caliber coach. Do you guys agree?
I think there's evidence. He had Aaron Rodgers for quite a while and made it once. I mean, I think, there's evidence to that. Yeah, I think there are clearly flaws to his game. And, I think he's got a quarterback in Dak Prescott that's not as good as Aaron Rodgers. And so I think the returns should be less than they were in Green Bay. And when you hire him in Dallas, that's what you should expect. And
But Dallas has looked for consistent competence in that role, right? Like Jason Garrett wasn't that guy, right? So I think that he's prey to this idea that like the expectations have shifted since he's been the coach there, right?
Yeah, I think you can win a championship with a great quarterback and a good coach, or maybe even a great coach and a good quarterback. I think Dallas has a good quarterback and a good coach. I'm probably exaggerating. There's layers to it. There's tiers to the quarterbacks if you want, and Dak Prescott was tier 2. I mean, however you want to describe it, I think the combination of Dak plus Mike McCarthy will not equal championship, Jeff.
Let me ask you guys this, because Sean Payton has as many championships as Mike McCarthy does, right? They had a great quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback. Why don't we talk about him?
Because he's not fat.
What's that?
He's not fat.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you
that's fair. That's fair.
Listen,
I just feel like we give people a pass sometimes. We act like this guy's an idiot over here, and we compare records, resumes. And it's like, what's he done?
I'm 100. I 100,000,000% got your back on this one. I see no difference other than McCarthy gets his feelings hurt, and Sean Payton's got more. And becomes vulnerable.
Sean Payton also is a renegade, which we like.
Right. That's and Sean Payton is up yours. I'm a tough guy. He's got Bill Parcells swagger where McCarthy wants to be liked. And
by the way, I had a very fun conversation with Payton at the Combine in 2019. He had, as I have tonight, a few too many drinks. And I want to say Peyton was an absolute utter mensch about one of my friends, a very well-respected fantasy football analyst, Evan Silva, said that one running back, Alvin Kamara, was, quote, soft. And Sean Payton, it blew it off like a champion. I would be hard-pressed to see Mike McCarthy blow off such,
and that's why
I think there are some social issues there that are at play, right? Jeff's been around these guys way more than I have, but like some of these guys play the game better than others.
Yeah.
Well, and I also feel like some of these, I mean, like you coach long enough, it's like the old Batman line: you die the hero, or you live long enough to become the villain, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that goes on in NFL coaching, where Mike Shanahan was a god in Denver and a buffoon in Washington. John Gruden was a god in Tampa, and he was a buffoon with the Raiders. Like, it's just there's enough of this that goes. I just feel like the longer you coach, sooner or later your flaws are going to be exposed.
Which by the way, can we pause for a sec, because you two are Kansas City based. I'm a Chiefs fan. Can we pause for a second as I'm sitting in the city of brotherly love, which Earl Thomas took far too literally. Andy Reid.
That's such a subtle reference, but
Andy Reid. Soren, can we pause? The references have to be subtle, or else they're not as good. Andy Reid is amazing. Can we pause and appreciate Andy Reid for a second because of what Jeff just said, which is that over time, most of these coaches, they get found out as idiots, right?
Right.
Like the land of regression finds all these guys. And meanwhile, Andy Reid, who, by the way, there's one of my best friends at PFF, Dave, who is a Chiefs fan to the core, hates Andy Reid. And I try to tell him, Andy's better than 99% of what you're going to ask for here, right? Because Andy has stood the test of time more than what Jeff is saying, right? Like he stood the test of time in Philly.
He had trouble in Philly.
That was 4 NFC championship appearances, 1 Super Bowl. With the Chiefs, it's 4 AFC championships, 2 Super Bowls, 1 Super Bowl win. What we're dealing with in Kansas City is better than what almost everybody else is dealing with.
Oh yeah, I don't think you just split an atom there, by the way, by solving.
Oh,
that.
thank you, Petro. I've been trying all week to split an atom. I failed. I tried again. I didn't get there, but
no one's paying me to give conferences to smart people. You're the one getting that paycheck right now. There, I did want to highlight.
I'm putting it right back into the podcast, though, Petro.
That'll be great. I love it. This from Terry. Sean Payton will be the next coach. He's talking about the Dallas Cowboys. We all agree with that, right? Like that is inevitable. It's 1 or 2 years in the broadcasting, then Sean Payton's going to be the Cowboys coach.
I mean, Drew Brees lasted a grand total of 1 year in the broadcast booth.
Yeah,
like, it's not for everybody. Yeah. My boss, Chris Collinsworth, again, Andy Reid of broadcasting. It doesn't, like, these men don't last very long in the broadcast booth.
Yeah, I think Peyton will do better than what Drew Brees did. I think he's better suited for it. You can see I interviewed Drew Brees once at the Super Bowl, and they said they're hiring him. I'm like, what? This is not the guy you're looking for, man.
It's like Derek Jeter going to the broadcast booth.
Yeah. Joe Montana, Marcus Allen. There's a lot of guys. Tony Gonzalez.
I tried to wear the Marcus Allen jersey to the AFC title game, and you had me rocking a Tony Gonzalez.
That's right. I gave you a Tony Gonzalez because
I mean, Soren, can we pause for a second about how gracious you were for my 2 AFC title game appearances?
We will pause for a long second, and I will go back to packing to take my family to Florida. That's what I have going on. You go back to the festivities there in Philadelphia, and Jeff, I don't know. You find another.
I'm going to sleep. Yeah.
Nobody wears pink like Jeff Chadiha does. I'm going to tell you that.
That's right.
Now. I'm so jealous. If I wore it, it would look like, I don't know, a chunk of bubble gum sitting on a chair. So that's going to do it for us here on the Too Deep. Thanks for joining us. Remember to hit that like button, the love button, the subscribe button. All of it helps us out immensely. It absolutely costs you nothing. Nothing it costs you, but it helps us. So if you like the podcast, if you like the stream, please go ahead and hit those buttons. We would appreciate it. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager, PFF.com. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Thanks for joining us here on Too Deep.